Hi, Forrest. Hi, Peaches. How are you doing?
Just fine, thank you.
So, what was your rank?
I got out as an E4, which was a specialist 4.
I went ahead and stuck around for a full 20 years and retired as a Master Sergeant, E8.
How old were each of you when you joined the military?
I was 17 in July. My mom had to sign for me, and I went in right after my birthday when I turned 18.
I was 20. I received my invitation to join the Army. In other words, I got my draft notice on 2 May 1969. And 20 days later, I ended up joining so that I could get a school out of the whole thing.
I went in 1968 because my mom saw an advertisement in the paper looking for women who were interested in joining the Women's Army Band. And at the time I played oboe and clarinet. And so I submitted tapes, and the military was very interested in me, flew me down to Alabama. But I had one of the first female recruiters who said, I know you want to go to nursing school. Talk to the girls in the band and see how they liked it. And I didn't get a good vibration from the girls that belonged to the band, so I had a guaranteed letter for school to go into the surgical tech program that they were opening up for women.
So, how did the community react to your deployment?
For me, I'm right out of high school. I had a boyfriend, and he was not really impressed with it. But at the time, 1968, I don't think people were aware. They were aware of Vietnam, but I don't think there was the animosity towards Vietnam back then. My immediate family was supportive, but I think it was very different being a woman going in. There was no big celebration, oh, she's going in the Army. It was pretty low-key. I was telling Forrest earlier, for many, many years, I never talked about being in the military. There was maybe a stigma attached to a woman being in the military. You were either a whore or a lesbian. You just couldn't be someone who loved their country. I was going to see my recruiter, so I was in uniform, and a bus went by, and somebody threw their lunch garbage at me.
Oh my!
And screamed, "Hey, there's that whore!" I'm like, I know they're not talking about me. And,
That's terrible.
I guess they are, because there's no other women here on the street. But when they say, guys were spit on, called baby killers, called this, called that. When I went home, I was like in tears, and I told my mother, and she's like, why? Why are people like that? And that's like, I don't know. But 90% of my time in the military was positive, and just few incidences like that.
When I finished high school and then I started college at a local community college, that was because my folks wanted me there. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be working. I wanted to be making a living, getting out and raising hell and wreaking havoc, And that's what I wanted to do. Everybody knew that they had to do something, but they didn't know exactly what. And so everybody was kind of they were unaware. They were edgy, but they were unaware of what would come from them. But we didn't know exactly what to do, So for me, I just kind of waited around until it came out and told me that I needed to break from things. I needed to get out and do something. My father served in World War II. The last thing that they wanted was for me to be tromping around in the rice paddies. So they said, you've got to get something out of this. You've got to, you really got to do something. So I enlisted and went into quartermaster. I was never given a bad reception, but then I didn't seek it out either.
Did you support the war at the time?
I did, because I think my generation, my father was a Korean War vet, uncles were World War II. My family, when my grandparents came over from Italy, they were very, very patriotic. It was like your duty to go. I felt we were doing a good thing at first, that communism was evil, and the communists were trying to take over the country. And later on, once I got close to getting out of the military, I kind of changed my mind.
Did the lines blur a little bit while you were in Vietnam?
Yeah. You saw things and you weren't really sure that, what are we doing there now?
Please understand that we knew what was going on in Vietnam. Every night it was portrayed on the TV. The news would come on and it would show the worst scenes that you could possibly see going on. And And that was what was coming over every night. We came
Yeah.
from a generation that everybody had their TV dinners sitting around the
Yes.
boob tube at night, and that's the family gathering, you know? And that was also the information collection, how you got information as to what was going on in the world. And there it was. Did I support what was going on? Better yet, I supported not doing anything against. I trusted in the system. It was a wide open field of opportunities. There were opportunities laid out in front of me that were terrific, and it was my future. It was my advancement. It was my ability to take care of my family. It provided so much for me. Now, it was with the understanding at any time that I could be put into harm's way. I got a chance to see a lot of countries, and that was what was great about being in the military and being sent to these different countries, was to see the fact that there were other ways of looking at things.
I mean, some of the people I went to high school never really left that area. I found that the military gave me an opportunity to meet people, do things I would never have ever done, and learn about the world at a young age.
You were on the home front. You were not. How did you guys both feel about what was happening on the home front?
People talk about TV programs. I didn't know what they were talking about. Or music. I didn't know what they were talking about, because music, I mean, we had avenues to go to the enlisted club. We had clubs, you know, in the civilian population that we could go to. So I got a chance to do things over there, but I didn't know a lot of what was going on till I came back to the States. We had one captain or one CO, her idea of what they called PT was we all went bowling. We drank beer and went bowling. And it was like, oh, okay, that works. You know, it's not really running, or, you know, but it works. And I remember friends,
You run to the bar.
we roller skated. I think we freaked some of the Asian people out, because we had someone send us roller skates from the States. And that was, you know, we did crazy things.
I saw what was being portrayed on the TV. I saw the demonstrations. I didn't understand the demonstrations, but they always seemed to be hosted by the same group of malcontents. I wasn't supportive of that. It's one thing to get out there and hold a demonstration. It's another thing to go out and take over a college or a university or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, what experience in life do these yahoos have that they think that they can actually go out there and voice their discontent? Well, excuse me. Why don't you learn a little bit more about life? Then you can actually tell me something I want to listen to. The only real argument my wife and I ever got in, the draft dodgers and providing amnesty, however. If they avoided the same kind of induction into military service that I did, then they chose, and they could live with what they chose.
I think for our freedoms, everyone has a duty.
The thing is that every American owes the government, they owe the people, okay, for the rights and freedoms with which they were. If you went in and you showed that you were motivated, you had an interest, you really wanted to do something, you wanted to get ahead of things, then that was recognized and you moved ahead. There were so many people during the draft that came in that their whole mission was to what they called ghosting. Do the absolute minimum that you could, avoid any and everything that you could, and just push yourself out to the fringe. To where if somebody stood up and said, yeah, I'll do that, I'll take care of that, sure. They moved you right along, and they recognized it and you were rewarded.
What were some of the major symbols of the Vietnam War?
Flower power. I remember, oh God, I remember I had a poster of Jimi Hendrix in my barracks. Loved Hendrix.
Well, you know, Jimi
Yes.
Hendrix was in the 101st Airborne.
As a woman, it was a little bit different, because even though I was working and I was in, you know, doing my duty, my job in the operating room, when I had free time, I had time to go out, have fun. But symbolisms, I had a friend who had a motorcycle, so I rode with him on his motorcycle, but bell bottoms, I'd go to the Navy store to get bell bottoms, because, you know, the sailors all had bell bottoms, so we could go, you know, down to the naval base and get bell bottoms. and fringed purse, and I had long hair and John Lennon glasses.
Well, when you think of, when you talk about symbolism, I see two things in my head, although I wear my symbols. There are two that are on here that I just can't get away from. One is the placing of the daisy and the end of the National Guardsman gun at Kent State University.
Kent State.
The other thing was I recall seeing the photograph of the one Vietnamese colonel killing the other BC commander. And the problem with that whole situation was that the reporter that took the photograph, of course, showed a very graphic, very horrifying photograph, but there was no explanation. But that was a snapshot that was sent around the world that basically formulate, just in its image, formulated opinion. And that was the kind of symbols that we saw every day that kind of turned people away from the whole thing. But I wear my symbols. You wear your symbols. One of our main symbols is,
Wow.
okay.
This denotes also, Vietnam, but Women's Army Corps. There's no longer a Women's Army Corps. I'm very proud to have been a member of that. What I ended up going over, my permanent duty station was Okinawa. And then from there, I worked in the emergency room and the operating room. And what they would do on a voluntary basis, we would go TDY in to pick up patients. So we'd go into like Tan Son Nhut Air Base or into Saigon, and we would be bringing patients back to the Army Hospital at Fort Buckner in Okinawa. And that in itself has issues for me. There are certain surgeries that they know not to assign me to because I literally get what they call diaphoretic. I get sweaty, I get really pale, I get really nauseous. Amputations, I have a real hard time doing.
That's kind of, I guess, symbolic to you in a way, all those surgeries.
There's certain songs that'll make me cry.
Yeah.
And they look at me crazy at work because we, in the operating room, we do listen to music.
Yeah.
And I kind of just have to go, okay, I'm just having a moment here. But it brings back memories of people. Their names are on the wall. Me and Bobby McGee. I had a really good friend at Fort Sam. His name was Robert McGee. And we used to go to the USO and dance. And we kept in touch over the years. And when he went to Vietnam, I wrote him I was still in my schooling at Fort Sam. And I got a letter from his commander that he'd been killed in action. So that song is like, oh boy, get the Kleenex out, honey,
Yeah.
And leaving on a jet plane, for some reason, they always played that. And it was like, yeah, and its symbolism to me is going when I went overseas.
Probably the one symbol that sticks out more than anything else is the wall.
My science teacher actually talked about that. He described a feeling of peace there. Do you guys get that sensation?
Yes.
I, on the other hand, I don't feel good about it, but I do it.
I do because I try to think of the good things that I can associate with it. I don't think of the suffering or the bad things. And like I said, I have a family member on that wall. I also have friends that I was in school with. And
Yeah.
so, I just try to remember the good times.